right, here we go. Here's part two with Jason Sutton, PGA Tour coach.
All right, let's get into the nitty gritty.
I'm about to open up another seltzer here.
Okay, we won't judge you.
Let's get in it.
um, the presentation next week, you're going to get into a little bit more the putting side of things. Do you want to delve into that a little bit more, or another
No,
question?
let's talk full swing
Okay, right.
and short game.
Yeah, so the short game thing I wanted to get into, just very, very, just get your thoughts on it, right? Because I know you're friends with Joe and you're friends with James and
Hmm.
a lot of those guys, and you know, I think everybody's coming to the place now where they're just like, this isn't for everybody and this isn't for everybody, and just find what works for you as a player. When you're looking at that in terms of players and working with your tour guys, are you teaching them to have that low spinner shot in their arsenal and then another baseline chip shot? Or are you trending more towards having them, hey, be a little bit more steep or a little bit more shallow? Or third option, does it just depend on who the hell's in front of you?
I think as Joe would say, it's tough to argue with the math,
Hmm.
right? So if you're measuring your guys when they're doing chip shots, patterns start to emerge,
Right.
right? So I haven't hit anybody that chips it very good hitting two down.
Okay.
And see a lot of fat shots, a lot of thin shots when that happens. And I haven't seen anybody chip it too poorly when they're like above six.
Okay.
Okay. So that's just the math of
It's just
that.
what you've seen. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's like I've measured thousands of chip shots, right?
Hmm.
And we can talk about if we were going to throw videos up with Will or
Yeah.
whoever, and stuff that we've worked on because that's a good story because it's
Hmm.
basically that. Um, Now, yeah, the person in front of you is important. I mean, I teach this stuff to my average golfers and my members,
Hmm.
and I see the same stuff, same things. But I think that the important thing is how to like create that pattern of that strike, right? And we can get
Yeah.
into the technical specific. It's not just telling somebody get steeper. They don't know how to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Very
Okay,
true.
they have to know the pieces that create that steepness. Or I haven't seen anybody that's too steep, honestly. That's one thing. But I mean, my guys chip it really good. I don't have anybody that's 15 down, but my guys chip it good somewhere in between like 6, 7, and 10.
Hmm.
So kind of in between probably the two variances of what we're seeing on Instagram.
Yeah.
Um, but there's different shots, right? And that's the back to your original question is, yeah, I'd say 75% of my guys' short game diet is that 30-degree launch, 27 to 30-degree launch
Yeah.
shot that we've been talking about, the low spinning shot. And then you have to be able to have some variability from that to hit the higher shots. You're going to be probably a little bit shallower most of the
Hmm.
time, right? Because you're
Yeah.
changing some stuff with wrist angles and club face. Not necessarily, but again, you got to have. So yeah, they have a multitude of shots
Hmm.
that they can go to. But I think once you learn to control contact and you learn to control trajectory and spin, I mean, what else is there, right? Then it's
Yeah.
just a matter of, making it go farther and shorter. So does that answer the question to
Yeah.
get
No,
things going? I
absolutely.
mean, yeah, the
Yeah.
answer is that we don't teach the one shot.
Yes.
And Joe, even I talked to Joe at the RSM last week and he was showing me, we actually played with one of his players in the practice round, me and Will,
Mhm.
and he was showing me they was hitting a high, soft shot.
Yeah.
He's like, see, I don't just teach low spinning shots, right? We all teach what's necessary based on the situation and, the environment.
Yeah. I think what you said there, you know, sometimes it can get a little bit lost in translation in terms of the information. So I was fortunate
Sure.
enough, as we both know, to spend some time with Joe when he was here in Toronto, and definitely having that chance to actually chat to him, show him my thoughts, my concepts, him demonstrate, cleared it all up for me, right? So it kind of made the Chinese into English for me, and I was able to understand it a little bit better. And then I had the tools, as you said, the pieces to make it all work. By
Yeah.
the way, we didn't just work on low spinners, we did other shots too. So you're right.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so what are those pieces? So club golfers have been exposed to this information now. Spin loft, hit down on it, create. Okay, well I want 45 dynamic. I want about a 30-degree launch. All right, so to do that, I got to
Hmm.
hit down on it. I need shaft lean. What are the pieces in your mind that if a club player went tomorrow and went to go, you know what, I want to try and explore that shot. What are the pieces they need to be putting in to get those numbers happening?
Yeah, let's just say we've got what I would call like a stock shot, right? You've
Mhm.
got a
Yeah.
reasonable amount of green to work with. You're at a relatively flattish surface, like what I usually start my club golfers on just to see where they're at, right? So it's 30, 25, 30 yards, right?
Mhm.
Nothing too fancy. Setup wise, I like the feet pretty narrow. I do enjoy a little bit of foot flare, toes out just a little bit, which helps rotation. Um, you can explore a little bit with ball position. Definitely don't want it forward. I see a lot of average golfers that play it way too far up, so
Okay.
they have a tough time hitting ball first, and they hit behind it. So middle to even slightly back is something
Okay.
that I've kind of changed a little bit in my thinking, that I think have helped. Um, how you line up your upper body versus the center of your pelvis is pretty big. You don't want a ton of, for a right-handed golfer, you don't want a ton of right bend. So I
Okay.
almost feel like they're actually left bending a touch towards target, which basically gets their spine pretty vertical,
So I feel
right?
like that lead shoulder is a little bit lower than the
Little
trail
bit
shoulder.
lower, yeah,
Okay.
maybe you're
Or
just,
level.
just leaning. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Kind of level-ish, right? So you're kind of setting them up for success. Now, depending on how tight the grass is, if it's a super tight lie, I would say
Hmm.
something I've learned from Ridyard is like the scarier the lie, the more I want the handle of the club up.
Yeah.
Okay,
So when
so I don't want.
Joe talks about VSP, that's an
Right, it
influence of
sets
that.
it a little bit. I
Yeah.
mean, you can still roll it inside from there, right? I mean, but you still got to teach
Everything's
them how to
possible.
swing it, right? So it doesn't, it's not an absolute that that's going to create a steeper VSP, but we're again setting them up for success. So I
Yeah.
like most of the time. I mean, even Will tell you this. I'll tell him to get the handle up, and I'll show him the video, and like it doesn't look like it's that far up, right? It's
Yeah.
just if you're going to get a little more owner deviation of the lead wrist. I just like to get the club flat, right? So
Hmm.
I'm not talking about heel off the ground stuff,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So it's just get the club flat. Just get the toe from sticking up in the air, which takes a lot of the turf interaction problems out of a lot of folks, right? Plus,
Hmm.
again, with a lot of radial deviation of the left wrist, things can get a little squirrely, I think, a lot of times in chipping,
Hmm.
depending on the
I would
shot, but we're
agree.
just talking about baseline stuff here. So I do like a little bit of pressure in the left heel as opposed to the toes, going back to that setup stuff, which allows for a little bit easier rotation. Um, if we go into the backstroke, again, I don't like the club getting too far inside, getting behind the player. I really don't care if the face is too open or too closed. It's sort of, I always explain just kind of your normal takeaway that you would make in your full golf swing. Um,
So if we're
I mean,
looking down the line of the golfer, we don't really want to
yeah,
see that club head get behind their pocket, basically in the
well,
backswing.
behind the handle, really,
Yeah.
honestly, yeah. I mean, a little bit's fine. Like, but
Okay.
again, it you can chip it okay from there, but then you got to get it back out in front of you at some point and get it around
Hmm.
the corner. So it just makes it a little more work for the player.
Yeah.
Um, and again, depending on how long the swing needs to be, the club's going to go up a little more in the backstroke. There's going to be some hinge, not a ton, right? I mean, just a little club head above the hands. You can do it a couple different ways there. But for the most part, just a little bit of rotation. I do. One thing that we might differ, me and Joe, a little bit, we talked about this a little bit last week, is I don't really prefer the trail arm to stay straight in the backstroke. I like the trail arm to bend a little bit and fold because I think that's a big proponent in how we control the arc height in the downstroke. Because if it's too long in the backstroke, I think you've sort of maxed out your width, if you can kind of visualize that,
Yeah.
which makes it a little tougher for you to get the club out of the ground on the forward side. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I prefer that right elbow to fold a little bit as the club hinges up. And then in the downstroke, this is where the sequence, I focus a lot on the sequence, is in chipping or let's say short game shots, the pelvis and the torso are basically going to be one unit. Okay, there's
Hmm.
not going to be a whole lot of separation.
Okay.
So to kind of think of that as like the first horse. The second horse would be like your left arm. The third horse would be your hands, and the fourth horse would be the club head, right? So we want them sort of transitioning in that order where the torso and the hips go first, sort of add some stretch to the chest and that lead arm.
Okay.
I like that right the trail elbow to stay at this pretty much the same bend ish it's going to straighten a little bit in the downswing. But
Okay.
again, the best way to kind of control that arc height, we're talking about the bottom of the circle getting too much into the ground.
Yeah.
Again, when we talk about steeps and shallows, this is important to probably mention is one, it would be the shape of the swing, right? So the club coming in a little bit more on the target line
Yeah.
would be a steepening piece. Okay.
Hmm.
And again, good players can do it. I think average golfers, it can get a little dangerous when that sweet spot kicks out too soon. I've seen a lot of shanks happen from there, but or good players can kind of manage that pretty well because they have much more um, better mechanics on the front side. And the steep and shallow piece is the wrist angles and shaft lean or non-existent shaft lean at impact. So
Yeah.
those are your two factors really when you're talking about steepening or shallowing the AOA. Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
So when it comes down again, this is where I've kind of changed my tune a little bit as well. Is like I used to think I want to get that sweet spot lined up with the hand path and not let it kick out too soon. I'll let it kick out a lot sooner now in say P5 and 6
Okay.
for the teachers out there, because that is going to help me to get the club down and get the steepening angle a little bit steeper if that's what we need.
Okay.
And then I think what the point of how do we get steeper and then not take a divot is where a lot of people get lost in translation, right? It's like, how do you do that? Well, they learn to push with the lead foot. As Joe said, just stand up, right? And that's great if you can just tell somebody to do that. My guy, my guy's like, oh, how do I do that, right? How do I
Yeah.
just stand? There's a way to stand up and there's a way to not stand up. So I teach people to basically, again, the sequence has to be correct. You've got to start using your lead foot, your lead hip, and then that lead lat to basically stand up and rotate to use your verticals and your AP force to get the club out of the ground. And we do that by also maintaining shaft lean, right? That's the thing that confuses people, I think, out there. They think if I have a ton of shaft lean, I'm gonna hit it heavy. And they're not. As long as they get the handle moving up and left. Okay, there's another thing that I've sort of changed my tune on. I used to always have my guys hitting like draws in chipping. Now it's like if you need them to be steeper, you need to have more of a cut pattern, I
Okay.
think, right? Because that gets the
Yeah.
club kind of kicking out, going
Yeah.
left. But I really focus on the movement of the handle of the golf club, right? Because if people try to lean the shaft, a lot of times, I don't know if people watch this on YouTube, but they're leaning
Yeah.
the shaft and then the hands are going out to the ball. That's not what we want. We want
Okay.
the handle to go up and left.
Right.
Right. So part of that's the pivot stuff. We just talked about the standing up, turning, and using the verticals, but also it's a good awareness of like, how should the club move?
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't go down the line. It doesn't go at the target. It goes left.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like it's kind
Yeah.
of like, talking about that truck pulling out of the pit stop on the motorway, right? The cabin goes first and then pulls the trailer out. So same, if I get that handle going left, it's going to get
Yeah.
that club
The
moving the
club
same
head kicks,
direction.
right. The
Yeah.
club head's still going towards the floor
Yeah.
as the handle's going up and left. And that's what creates, and then, again, I'm trying to get players to hit the ball first.
Yeah.
Simple as that, right? So that, and then you go in through all the math stuff with the spin loft and the angle of attack and then the launch angles. Like, I mean, all I know is I got a 60-degree tool and I'm trying to launch it. I'm trying to deliver 45 degrees of loft into the ball.
Yeah.
Where's that 15 degrees coming from? It's
Yeah.
not just friction. It's not just contact. It's some of that,
Yeah. A little bit.
a little bit. Yeah. To get that thing to launch at
Yeah.
28, like you better have some forward shaft lean.
Yeah.
If you're dumping your wrist angles, I mean, you can be swinging to the right, swinging to the left. You're going to suck. I think you're going to have a tough time
How much
hitting it solid.
how much lateral kind of sway towards target do we need in that backswing? Because if we're going to stand up, right, and we have that kind of elevation and that extension, we would prefer maybe to be a couple of inches in front of golf ball, maybe a top of chipping swing, if that's the best way to describe it. Or can we
Yes.
be fairly neutral? Because if we stand up from fairly neutral, we're probably going to dump it a little bit early.
Good. That's a good point. That's one of the things I just forgot to mention was the center of mass of the body
Mhm.
moving towards target is the final sort of piece, is steepening piece, but also controlling low point piece.
Mhm.
Right. And in my opinion, you got two options. You can do it early in the backswing, or you can do it in transition. I prefer in transition just because I've found that when I try to get my guys to go towards target in the backstroke, a lot of times that can bleed over into their full swing and it
Yeah.
can be a problem. Right. So that's just me. And I know you can do either one, but one way or another, you've got to get your upper body translating towards target
Mhm.
as you strike, before you strike the ball and through impact, because that really, really helps to control, where we touch the ground.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far wrong because I remember hearing Victor talk about maybe a year and a half ago, but saying when they first started doing this with those pitch shots, he felt
Yeah.
it just creeping into his full swing.
Right.
And that was a big problem with how he moves and how he organizes the club in full swing. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's obviously there's a lot of pieces to this to make it all work. But the one thing that, Joe's been very adamant about is low point and having that low point moved in front of the golf ball. And you can still be steep in terms of the delivery just as long as that low point's in front of the golf ball, and steep doesn't necessarily mean taking divots. So again, just kind of going through these little pieces and putting them all together. And I think what you kind of referred to a little bit there, and again, if club golfers are still listening, I think it's important to nearly look
We've
at
lost them
it.
all.
We've lost them all. They're gone. Um, what's a steepener and what's a shallower? And what
Yeah.
we mean by that is, okay, what steepens the delivery of the club head into the golf ball and what shallows or flattens the club head delivery. And you got to organize this stuff yourself and look at your chipping action and go,
Yeah.
right, how much of which do I have here?
Yeah.
Does everything in my swing shallow it out and flatten it out? Well, that's not good. So I got to add in some steepeners, and then you got to go find those. And if you can kind of look at it a little bit that way, like a little jigsaw puzzle,
Yeah.
sometimes I found that can help players in assembling stuff. So, since we're on the subject, let's have a little look here, and we're gonna
Yeah,
go.
that's exactly, and as you pull it up, like that's exactly what I talked to with Will is talk about too with Will is Will always thought steep was a bad thing
Yeah,
before we started working together, and he was super shallow. So yeah, in his we kind of do opposite things in his short game and his full swing.
yeah. So we're just
Right.
gonna we just brought it up on screen there for
Oh, there
anybody
you go.
still
Yeah.
listening. So we got Will up here, and we've got a down the line and a face on, and the down line on the left. This is a post you put up on Instagram, and I've just transferred the data numbers that you posted up. So we got
Hmm.
angle of attack -10, dynamic loft 44. We got that vertical SP we mentioned, which is about 75, which is absolutely fine. And we got that launch at
Yep.
29. So we got all the numbers that we want to do. So if we were kind of looking, and we'll just play this video, and both of these swings are going to move at the same time. But if we just
Yeah, and
have a
those are
look,
different swings, by the way, obviously.
absolutely, yeah. I
Different
think
short
the
game
one on
areas.
the right hand side is more of a floaty kind of a higher shot, I think. But
Yeah.
if we're looking on the left hand side, the down the line perspective first, you talked about, and I think it's probably one of the more important things, where that club gets located in backswing. And so if
Yeah.
we just bring him back and just kind of stop around here, it's a fairly lengthy swing in terms of what he's doing. But if we
Yeah,
stop,
he always talks about how he can't, when I show it to him on video, he can't believe how long the backswing is. He's like
Mhm.
always trying to shorten it, but it's kind of like what we talk about in putting is if you shorten it too much, then you get over accelerated on the downswing and you get out of sequence. So I don't mind it
Okay,
being a little longer because
all
then it
right.
allows him to do his body stuff.
Okay, so if anything, allow him to actually get it a little bit longer than what he's doing. So
Yeah.
when you're kind of then, okay, well, that's a good position to be in. So as he works down, we're kind of getting rid of this for the moment.
Yeah. So this is where we've really worked hard in the last probably 8 months to the year
Okay.
is in the downswing, the club head tends to want to drop a little bit too much behind his hands.
Okay.
See, that's pretty good right there. Yeah. So this is
Yeah.
what I'm talking about as far as like getting the sweet spot lined up with the hand path earlier. So
Yeah.
it kicks out in front of it a little bit. So it kicks out a little earlier coming down is he gets a little bit inside coming
So he
down. And
gets he
that's when
gets a
he
little
gets
bit in here. Yeah.
right. Because he's
Okay.
never had a ton of shaft lean. So we've
Hmm.
never really, I'm not going to try to get him to lean it more. So that
Okay.
would kind of take that off the table. So we've got to make sure that the club kicks out. And he feels like his big feels here is he's going to push really hard with his left foot and he's going to rip the handle off the club and left.
Oh wow. Yeah. So he's really
See how
pulling
it
it around
goes
the
left?
corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the big thing we're working on
Okay.
now. And his scrambling stats have gone way up since we've worked together the last 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. The other thing is him, if you look on the to the right, run it
Yeah.
back a little bit, notice his upper body translating a little more forward. See, that's pretty neutral for him. So I actually
Yeah.
now, and this is
Because
an old video.
you can see him going a little bit there with
Yeah, he tips
just
back a little bit.
yeah.
So
But
if you looked
from
at
there,
the stuff that we did last week at like RSM, you'll see
mhm,
his head actually move a little more towards target in transition, and he gets a lot more on top of the left side. So he can get like as steep as he wants to get, and it just gets better and better and better. Because he kind of runs in there probably 7 to 10 with his AOA. Like he doesn't
mhm,
get super steep.
yeah,
Yeah, that's when he chips at his best. And that's kind of going back to like, figuring out what your player, how it performs the best. But we still get that window that we're looking for. He can hit the low spinner, he can hit the high one, he can hit the in-between windows, whenever he wants.
and you can definitely see that on the right hand side, the face on, that pulling up of the handle as he moves
Oh,
around the
heck yeah.
corner. Yeah,
Yep. That's a big
I
thing we work
love
on.
I love the rotation through the golf ball with the
Hmm.
body, the pivot, the head, the
Yeah.
neck, the eyes,
But see,
that
here's the
real
thing. He's not
free.
trying to rotate. He's
Yeah.
basically pushing up with his lead side. So that vertical force creates
Mhm.
the rotation that he's looking for.
Okay. And it's set up, happy with everything that he does. It's set up.
It's still would like to handle up a little bit more there. It's still a
Okay.
little low for my taste.
Okay.
Like I said, when he feels like the handle's way up, it doesn't look that much different on video.
Yeah.
But especially because this is our short game areas at this point in the year have a lot of grass on it.
Yeah.
So like at tour events and that grass is much tighter. I
Hmm.
want his handle up more, and I'll even have him open the face a little bit more as well.
Hmm. Because he likes to really pronate those forearms around the way through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
what's the one thing he does really, really well in this action that if players were looking to take something from this, right? And we've talked a little bit about what you guys are
Yeah.
working on, but what's his superpower when it comes to this stuff?
I think it's just getting that lead side to rotate
Okay.
and then getting the handle to go left.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Because that's something that a lot of average golfers don't hear a lot. And that's
Yeah.
why how many times have you given chipping lessons and the player shows up and they're ripping it inside and then their hands go out and then they keep going out through strike and they hit it in the hosel 10 times in a row.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get them to like stand up and rip the handle left, then the sweet spot lines up much
That's what I
better.
really like there, where he's kind of got mid hands point,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
like
and
neutral
it,
in my opinion, right? I
yeah, and
don't
then it's
now he's
moving.
kicking it out
Yeah, it's
more.
moving up from there where we see with a lot of club players from that position, you would see where the hands go down, right? The hands would keep going down, but
Well,
that's
the bad combination is when they get steep, like vertically coming down, the club
yeah,
kicks out too early because their wrist angles have come out early, and then the hands go straight down the line.
yeah,
That's when you get the shank,
the double whammy.
the double whammy, yeah, the double negative. So it's not like they're too steep as far as like again, like
Okay,
understanding, forward shaft lean is like huge.
so let's look at we got one of your guys over here.
Oh, this guy's the best chipper in the game right here.
So
Unbelievable. This is Brian Campbell.
there's Brian Campbell. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about Brian in terms of what he's done this year, the achievements, etc. But I just like this to look at this because it's like a slightly different action in
Hmm.
terms of what he does with the club head on the way down. So if we kind of just grab this a little bit, and I know it's moving a little bit faster, but very much outside the hands on the way back.
Yeah.
And now there's that little loop, that little shadowing mechanism on the way
Yeah.
down, which is, when you look at that, you would first say, all right, well, that's, a little bit shallow. And we got a bunker game,
Hmm.
our bunker shot here too, to have a look at. And we can kind of see the same thing. And, the interesting conversation around this would be when we look at Brian's full swing, we see a similar kind of pattern. He does
It's the
something.
same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah. Does
exactly.
the same thing. Yeah.
So when we're looking at this, and I think we have the stats there, but he's been remarkable this year. He's for those who don't know, Brian just secured his PGA Tour card by way of Corn Ferry Tour this year,
Hmm.
and he rocketed up greens in regulation and scrambling. I think he went from 50s, 70s in both departments into top 10 basically. So what have you guys been working on in terms of the short game stuff with him that's helped him develop so well?
Yeah. So he would be totally the opposite of Will. Like he doesn't need and doesn't really ask for a lot of technical help. Like I'll give
Okay.
him some of that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot more, I'd say, call performance training, where I'll
Okay.
just have him like, okay, hit this window, hit this shot, cut this one, draw this one. Like he's a very, I mean, lack of a better term, a feel player, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of knows his feels. And I'm more of like I'm there as sort of a filter to go, all right, this is not good, and this is why. If
Mm-hmm.
he has questions. But he's great at like varying his height, trajectory, spin. So this would be a high shot. That's why he
Yeah.
looks shallower coming down.
Hmm.
When he hits a low shot, that club never gets behind him. He can hit, and he's got a very kind of quickish tempo as well. Like it's a different cadence than like your normal player. This guy, when he played in the U.S. Open this year, he got it up and down 9 times his last round at Pinehurst number two. I mean, it's just it's stupid. He's so good, and he knows how to basically control his golf ball so well. But I mean, yeah, this stuff kind of looks a lot like his full swing pattern,
Yeah.
which I think a bunker shot really is. Anyways, I don't try to change that.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I remember Pete
Yeah,
Count saying to me, "Hey, if you want to work on full stuff, just work on bunker shots too. It kind of
yeah, it's not. Yeah,
replicates." So,
exactly.
so he gets quite open, and again, hey, we talked about intention at the start. What's he trying to
Hmm.
do here? Hit that high flopper. So, but he gets a little bit open with that rib cage, that left
Hmm.
knee, that left hip. Is that something you like to see a little bit more with club players? And I know there's been a trend to go back to a little bit more neutral. I always like to see players. You mentioned the lead foot flare earlier on that you'd like to see. So I always like to see players with a little bit more open body and chip shots, especially club golfers. Is that something you like to see? Or are you happy with players being a little bit
Honestly,
square?
I don't. Yeah, I like to keep them pretty square, and I
Okay.
just like to add a little foot flare. I don't really like them because again, you can get, with the average golfers, they can kick it out and swing left too much
Hmm.
because they don't have control over the sweet spot and the wrist
Yeah.
angles like the good player does. So I try to get them pretty neutral, um, and pretty square, I guess, with their heels.
And in terms of what we're seeing in the bunker action,
Yeah,
like a
it's
lot of
just
what
a
he
full
does here.
swing, right? It's just, I
Yeah.
mean, he's stacked a lot more on his left side.
Yeah.
Um, it's actually a drill that we've done in the last year when he's actually gotten healthy. For his story, when he came out of college, great player, really good amateur player, got his tour card right out of school,
Hmm.
lost his card after the first year, and then he got hurt. So he had a wrist, kind of left arm, left shoulder injury that kind of progressed. We've worked together for 3. This is our third year finishing up, I think.
Okay.
And this is the first year. Last year was the first year he's actually been healthy. But one of the things that he would do, like that he kind of came up with to test his left wrist, was he'd hit bunker shots. He hit
Hmm.
buried live bunker shots. He wanted to slam that club in the ground.
Okay.
So he liked to take more divots with his wedges just to kind of like feel confident that it's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
Kind of a different mindset.
All right. So we're gonna move on and have a look since we're talking about
Hmm.
him anyway. Have a
Yeah.
look at this full swing, and again, what a great achievement! You must be delighted, and the whole team must be delighted getting the card secured for next season. So,
Oh yeah.
um, I know he's done some amazing things, and I think he had, I think 8 top 20 finishes this year on Corn Ferry, 2 runners up. So he nearly got that win. But again,
Yeah.
great things for next year. So, what mainly have you guys been working on with the full swing?
Yeah. So again, with and I'm not sure when this was taken. I have to kind of look back,
I
but
think there's
I've
about
got some before and
three.
afters.
Yeah.
When he first, I think it was at the end of last season, because he was a bubble boy last year. He
Hmm.
finished 75th and just barely made it to where he retained his card, which is amazing.
Okay.
So before, and when he had the wrist injury, it's kind of tough to understand. But I was like, describe what you're feeling. And he said, basically, if you clenched your fist as hard as you can for about
Hmm.
20 seconds and everything on your left side tightened up, that's basically what he felt like when he played the last 2 years.
Jesus.
I'm like, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So through impact, because again, he was always so my thought as a teacher is I'm like, all right, how can we take some pressure off the wrist? So
Yeah.
taking back there, yeah. So he's always been pretty vertical in the backswing, which I don't mind.
Hmm.
But initially, when we first started working together, I'm like, let's kind of explore the underload pattern a little bit to see if that takes some of the pressure off the wrist. So
Yeah.
this is him feeling like he's underloading it, which is not as much hinge.
Okay.
You can see it definitely. This is probably maybe a 3/4
Yeah,
swing,
just
but
a little three-quarter swing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's always kind of slots it down, and he always loved to hit fades, right? He hated to hit the ball left
Okay.
and didn't draw it much, but he's changed that this year a little bit to where he can go both ways. But if you look at the downswing, they're taking back into the backswing again for me.
Yeah.
That hadn't changed a whole lot. Like so, we've kind of left the backswing alone, letting it be steep feeling. The only thing we
Okay.
want to feel is basically his left pec and his left arm feeling connected.
Okay.
And this is a 3/4 shot. His backswing's much longer than that. But if you look at his left arm in the downswing, see how it kind of looks a little Ricky Fowler-ish, right? So
Yeah.
very bent. And I think a lot of that is because of the lack of feeling in his left arm.
Yeah. 100%.
And this is probably maybe a little bit later, but when we started working together this past year at the beginning of the season, before he went on the road,
Yeah.
when I saw that he could actually keep that left arm connected and his left forearm would actually pronate, I
Mm.
knew that he was going to play good
Okay.
because he could never do that before his injury.
And how do you guys work on that? Was there like a couple of things underneath between
Uh,
the left tricep and the
yeah,
pec,
we did
or?
some. I'd put like put like a noodle under there a little
Hmm.
bit. But more, like I said, it's a lot of the sessions that we do is so much very performance based. Like we'll sit
Okay.
there and go, all right, the tree on our range, you've seen, and you can see
Yes.
that in the distance there. We'll set up something, or we'll set up a TrackMan test and be like, all right, there's the pin. This is, you got to curve it around that tree.
Hmm.
Don't let it finish. Don't let it finish to the right, or
Yeah.
and then you got to draw it around the tree. Don't let it finish over here. It's a lot of that kind of stuff that he loves and he kind of thrives on. So it's very, very non-technical, I would say, to believe it or not, of like how we work together. He's one of the smartest, probably the highest golf IQ players I've ever worked with,
Wow.
just from a mental side. I mean, he's just
Yeah.
got so much self-belief. Um, he for an example, at the end of the season, like he's not a very long hitter, never really tried to be a long hitter. We've never chased distance. I mean,
Okay.
he can smoke it if he wants. So he's got another gear, but
Yeah.
he'd almost rather hit like a little bleeding cut out in the middle of the fairway and then take his chances, which I think is why his greens and regulation went back up.
Yeah.
So we had a little part, share a kind of a cool story. We had a little party for him a month or so ago after he got off tour, celebrating him going back to the PGA Tour. And one of the members asked him the question is like, what did you learn from being on tour right out of college, and how are you going to apply that to now being back on tour? And I thought his answer was brilliant. I wish I would have recorded it. He said, I finally, when I went on tour before, it's kind of a very common story, probably, where you start looking at other players on tour and you think maybe I got to be more like this guy, or I got to chase distance, or I got to hit it farther, or I got to hit a certain shot shape. He
Hmm.
goes, I finally figured out I just have to play Brian Campbell golf. I got to be the smartest guy on the course. I got to basically play within my limitations, and I just got to be me. And I thought that was so good,
Perfect.
because I mean
Yeah.
he's one of the best wedge players I've ever seen. He's a great putter. He's got one of the most linear strokes. Like he does a lot of stuff that I don't really my out of my preferences, but
Yeah.
it's like, why do we test our players? If you see something that's a little funky out there, if it's functional, it's repeatable, don't change it.
Yeah.
Don't
100%.
change
Like,
it, right? Be smart enough not to change it because it doesn't look or fit into your mold. But he's such a good dude. He's a super competitor. Like nothing bothers him. I mean, he's got probably one of the highest bounce back stats on tour because he can just shrug off a double bogey and just go and make 6 birdies in a row.
yeah.
But I mean, he plays with it himself. He knows he's going to hit a lot of fairways. He's going to lay up on most par fives,
Hmm.
going to wedge it in there, and he's going to make putts. And yeah, I mean, it's a shame he didn't win this year. We had a 4-shot lead at Bogota and lost in a playoff. But I mean, I think he's going to have it. I don't think he'll ever get off the tour now. As long as he stays healthy,
It'll be
he's
good.
gonna do well.
All right, everyone, just a quick break in the episode to thank FlightScope Golf for sponsoring this episode. FlightScope Golf is one of the premier launch monitor companies in golf and really is the premier company when it comes to affordable and accurate equipment for the everyday club player. With the FlightScope Mevo and indeed the Mevo Plus, you can purchase a launch monitor to suit exactly what your needs are in terms of your golfing progress right now. And with the Mevo Plus, you actually have the ability to add on packages like impact location, different data parameters as you go and as your needs change as a player. There's no annual fee either, so there's no hidden charges. You just pay up front and you get your product straight away. And if you'd like to avail of a 5% discount of any FlightScope product, simply use the link in the description or the link on my bio website, Instagram bio, on the social media, and add SMG Flight at checkout. So that's SMG Flight at checkout to get that 5% discount. And again, what we really want in practice and learning is feedback. This gives you feedback at a very affordable price. So back to the episode.
That's the one really interesting thing I like, and when we have a look at Will and one of your other players too, we'll see those things. And that's the one thing I wanted to get you on here was there's these little idiosyncratic things. I think there is those things with every tour player, but just we're presented with the top 10 and what is how JT does it and Rory does it. So even little things like with Brian here as he's working down in between, like kind of say, as he works down between like P5, P6, you can see that face in terms of what we would be told. Relatively speaking, is a little open at that point, but it doesn't matter because he just knows where impact is and he knows how to get it there.
100%.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter.
And it's kind of interesting because, again, he used to, I mean, it was always fade, 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 fade. And then he started hitting more draws throughout the season, especially off the tee, just to pick up a little bit, but he can go both ways. But one of the big things you can kind of see on the right screen there is we have worked a lot on using his verticals and pushing up and rotating, which I was hoping it would clean up that left arm position. Because he would always he always kind of cringed when he saw his left arm bend at impact. He's like, how do I fix that? I'm like,
every club golfer is listening, going, yeah, me too.
Exactly. Yeah. He's like, you got to push sooner. You got to push harder with your lead side. And that kind of helped clean it up. But yeah, that looks better. I don't think that's probably the one. I use a couple of shots in my presentation.
Yeah. I think this is from 4 or 5 months ago in terms, but you can see that lead femur doesn't really rotate a whole bunch.
Right.
Kind of keeps a little flex at that lead knee. And that's probably,
but again, it's him trying to hit a fade too, right?
Yeah.
So it probably would look a little different if he's trying to hit a different ball shape.
Absolutely.
That's probably a little bleeding cut. And his cuts are like, I mean, they ain't curving much. Trust me. It's like, it's on a rope. It's a rope, man. It's like just falls to the right. But yeah. So this one's way more
exciting times for him, eh?
Oh, 100%.
Exciting times for the team. All right, so we're going to have a look at Will now. So Will, I think is I would catalog him in the Jim Pure kind of aesthetics thing, right? Where you're if you didn't know who he was and you didn't know the amount of reasons dollars wise why he's on tour because he's such a fucking great player, you would look at it and go, oh man, I don't know if I like what I see here, right? So we'll just play it through a little bit for people watching. And we'll just kind of get him up top of backswing. We have a driver swing on the left-hand side and an iron swing on the right-hand side. And as we get up top here, we're going to see a couple of things that for a lot of club golfers, they would be told not to do. Number one is the hand depth. So we don't have a lot of hand depth up top there. We got the hands.
0.
Yeah, right. If we drew a line from the hands just for those, it would probably hit in around the front toe or the front of the shoe. We got that trail elbow. The forearm is nearly parallel to the ground. That trail elbow
super
flying.
Internal right shoulder.
Yeah, a little Eamon Darcy-ish kind of motion up there up top.
Yep.
He did
Wide open club face.
Wide open club face.
Yep.
But he wins, and he shoots scores, and he had a good finish. We were talking about our RSM last week. You were out there at Sea Island in Georgia. Had a good finish there. 4 rounds played. So, what do you work on with Will? And from a coaching perspective, for the coaches listening, you rock up, Will McGirt stands up, hits one in front of you and goes, I'm not happy with how I'm hitting it. And you look, and I don't care who you are, the very first thing you're going to see as a golf coach is the things that we just mentioned. How hard was it for you to not do those things? And I know the story behind it a little bit. I'm going to get you to tell the story a little bit again. And why he is still with you was one of those reasons. How hard was it to look at those things and go, whatever you do, don't change that, don't change that, don't change that?
Yeah. So, all right, let's start from the beginning, right? If we have time, because it's a good story, and I've learned a ton from working with Will. I've learned how to be a better tour coach, working with what we consider an unusual golf swing, which I think still think it's the coolest swing on tour. So the first time that I saw him, and I'd seen him swing before, we knew each other. Yeah, we knew each other prior. We first officially started working, and he's like, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, one, I would never change your backswing," which I think he kind of liked because his trail shoulder doesn't rotate. Will it be externally?
Externally, yeah.
Yeah, externally very, very well. So he's got some limitations. He's had 2 left hip surgeries in the last 5 years. So we've got a few limitations to kind of work with there or work around. And he wants to draw the ball, right? So you got to think of, it always starts with an intent, and it starts with a goal. So if you remember the picture that for those listeners are actually viewing,
Hmm.
the two trees that are in the middle of our range, this is him on the golf course. I said, what do we need to do to make you successful? And he said, if you can teach me how to hit it lower than those trees on the right, there you go. It would be the trees on the right from my bay. We're out on the range
Hmm.
with Brian here. And if
Yeah.
you can teach me how to hook it around those trees on the left, I feel like I can win again on tour.
Yeah.
And I tell that story to my average golfers and my members all the time because
Hmm.
everybody shows up on your list and you go, oh, I just want to hit it straight. He wants to curve it more. Why do you think that's important? And I was asking, they're like, I don't know. It's like, because if you can curve it, you can control your golf ball.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the lead in, right? So I'm thinking, all right, this is me from the teaching perspective is like, how do I not change his backswing and build that pattern of hitting big draws?
Yeah.
So when I first started working with him, he was very kind of zeroed out with his club path. Ball was kind of going straight up in the air and
Hmm.
floating and not curving at all. And he hated it. Like he hates when the ball goes straight. So the first thing that I do in that situation is I look at how he's moving, how his pivot is moving.
Hmm.
So if we had a face on view back 3 years ago or whatever, when we first started working together, he would get super stacked on his left side. So his upper body would kind of translate forward in his backswing. So he was very much
Nearly
on his.
like nearly like the chipping action we were talking about
Yeah,
beforehand.
exactly.
Yeah.
This is where it
Yeah.
gets kind of confusing when we start working on chipping and full swing. So we don't want
Okay.
to do that in the full swing. So
Yeah.
he would get super stacked on his left side. Early transition because he was trying to clear his hips. He
Hmm.
would kick the club out and the club would come down super vertical, and his upper body would open up way too early, which would kind of it's great if you're trying to hit cuts,
Yeah.
but not really good if we're trying to hit draws. So
Yeah.
the club would come in super vertical. He could never get the club behind his hands. And so that's where we started. So
Okay.
the first thing we did was I wanted him, so we had to get his pivot better. We had to put
Hmm.
draw pieces into his pivot. So I literally wanted him basically his hips would actually reverse as well. If you can kind of imagine if you had a line up the side of his right leg and his
Yeah.
right hip would move towards target super early in the backswing.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we got everything going towards target,
Yeah.
nowhere to go. So the first thing we worked on was basically feeling like we're pushing from our left foot hard, moving our pelvis hard into our right foot as far as he could go.
Okay.
And then turning his upper body sort of behind the ball, for lack of a
Yeah.
better explanation. Right. So I wanted his upper body to feel like he had more spine tilt to the right, more of a
Hmm.
draw, more loaded position. And that was not too difficult. And we did work on one little backswing thing, but we'll get to that in a little bit at one point. But the transition piece was the biggest aha moment for us to kind of get the club again shallowed out. So we're on TrackMan all the time, right? So we're trying to get that path as far right as we can get it, getting the ball hooking.
Hmm.
So what we did early on was basically feel like as he's transitioning, as it's coming out of the top, I want I want him moving pressure into his lead side, but I don't want him to let his lower body open up too soon. So
Okay.
yeah, his right hip kind of kicks forward a little bit there,
Yeah.
coming down. So we're trying to basically keep our right hip back as long as possible
Hmm.
to allow for time for his hand path to drop and the club to fall more
Okay.
behind him.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the biggest piece. And this is good for average golfers too. If you're trying to draw the ball,
Yeah.
most people open up too soon and the club swings across the ball. So we spent a ton of time like his feeling in this scenario is he feels like he's pushing down into his right heel super hard in the downswing, almost like a squat feel.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he can always feel like when he starts jumping off his right foot too early, he knows his hips are opening up too soon.
Yeah.
So this is like the first year that we worked together to
Okay.
where we could get to where literally, if you watch this work, if he wasn't getting it six to the right with his path, he wasn't happy because he
Okay.
knew once he got under competition, six became two.
Yeah, and it would reverse back a little bit.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And he's trying to hit cuts occasionally. He can hit a cut, no problem. But again, our stock shot 90% of the time is going to be a draw.
Hmm.
All right. So that's the big that those are the big pieces. Now, learning to
So
flight it, we did mess a little bit with his lead wrist. Again, I get the
that's what I was gonna
questions like,
say.
how does he
Yeah.
square the face, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's always done this super well. So the top of his backswing, when it comes out of the top, that lead wrist starts to flex super early, which
Yeah.
all good players do.
Hmm.
Right. I didn't have to teach him how to do that. Now, I had to teach him how to do that a little bit earlier if he was trying to hit a knockdown shot,
Okay.
right? Because we wanted a little more shaft lean.
Hmm.
But the challenge is if you're trying to flight it, what's going to happen? You're going to tend to translate more towards target with your upper body and get on top
Yeah.
of it. Right. So that's a conflicting piece of our goal, which is hitting bigger draws.
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of abandoned that a little bit. Now, fast forward to just the last year. Now, stop it right there. So you see how where his club head's coming out in the exit plane?
Yeah.
That's that's what we're trying to avoid. That's way too high.
Okay. So
Okay.
up here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's way too high for him. So I know that that's going to tend to happen because we're trying to drop it in. We're trying to draw it a little bit
Yeah.
more. But this is the point I want to make to coaches out there. And all PGA Tour coaches know this, but this is good for maybe young coaches that are going to teach tour players. Listen to your player. Okay. And this is what I've learned from Will because he knows, again, all I'm trying to do is pick his brain of like, what were your feels in 2016 when you were your best? Okay. So the things he's told me is I feel like I'm hitting my best when the club exits lower, okay, through post impact and into that exit plane. So that
Hmm.
club would come out a little bit below his. Now think about that because we're trying to shallow the club, so we're lowering it more in the downswing, and then we've got to exit it more left. Now, why is that important? Because for him, that's his squaring the face piece. Okay,
Ah, okay.
I don't want him trying to bow his left wrist or trying to roll his forearms more. He's got to do it more with his body, and he has to do it when the handle exits lower, the face squares up. That just happens for him. Okay, so this is the cool thing. It kind of happened last week, and this was hopefully we can carry this into next season. Is yes, we're trying to stay closed longer to shallow the club, and we've worked on that 1,000 times, and he's got it. Okay,
Hmm.
but I still have to consider his left hip being what it is. Like it'll pop sometimes. Like in the practice round, it actually popped. It's not hurting him, but I mean, it's just a weird deal. So I'm still trying to protect his body.
Hmm.
And also, I'm trying to get the club to exit left. So we're working at RSM on Monday. This is kind of the cool stuff. And this is where I kind of learn like sometimes it doesn't make sense, but then you just kind of learn from it and move on. He goes, Pro, I played my best when I actually dropped my left foot back off the target line, play from an open stance. Now, theoretically, that didn't make any sense to me when we first started working together. I would never in a million years have done that because I thought now he's going to swing more left.
Yeah.
Okay. All of a sudden, we started messing around with the drill, and he'll probably, if he ever listens to this, he'll laugh because I had him close his stance one time because we were trying to stay closed longer.
Yeah.
And he
That makes
goes,
sense.
yeah, yeah, of course. And then he goes, well, I'm gonna open my stance because this feels really good, and just absolutely started flushing it, started flighting it the way we wanted, coming out of the nice window, drawing it, and he felt that exit feel that he's been looking for.
Hmm.
Okay, I mean he's been playing on tour for 14 years. He knows what his good swings feel like,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, shit, that's it. That's the final piece. And he's looking, he's like, this is unbelievable how good this is. So he was top 30 in ball striking last week. If we could have putted at all, we would have finished top 10.
Hmm.
But again, that's just me. And it's funny because when we first started working together, we were just talking about other coaches or whatever. And he goes, one of the things that Butch Harmon told me one time is like, all I got to make sure you listen to your tour player. Now, a lot of times they can get confused with feels and you have to it's not everything, but
Yeah.
it's something that I probably wouldn't have done 10 years ago. I would have probably pushed back on it and go, no, there's no way that's going to work. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the point. That's the learning moment there. And I think that's why we work so well together because he would probably tell you, because I know he sent me some other tour players and whatnot. And he goes, why do you work with Jason? He goes, one, he'll tell me why. Like,
Hmm.
and the reason why we're doing this, and this is, he wants to know the why. Like, he can be very, very technical. He's a very smart very intelligent golfer.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows the golf swing.
Yeah.
So that's where like, we have great dialogue because I'm like, yeah, I can get that. But then he's like, okay, what happened there? And I'll explain it to him. He goes, okay, that makes sense. This is what I felt. So it's me and
Hmm.
him going back and forth on what he feels as the player and then what I'm imparting as the information. And then that's how we sort of get to these conclusions a lot of times. But I would have never in a million years put him in that stance unless he
Hmm.
would have told me this is where I used to play.
Yeah. So you kind of started off with the whole process with, hey, what do you want to achieve out of this? Okay, I want to hit it. I want
Yeah.
to hook it around that tree and I want to keep it lower than that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your own head, then you're thinking, right, what do I need the club and the path? And okay, I need all that stuff to happen at impact. All right, how can we get that organized? What's he really good at?
100%.
And then
Yeah.
what do we change? Because
That's the
straight off the
puzzle.
bat, if he goes, I want to draw it, but I want to stand with an open stance, you're like, well, that doesn't make
No chance.
sense.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
have I would have definitely pushed back on that one
Yeah, as much as you're
early
going to
on.
have like
Yeah.
the angle of attack down, pushing the path a little bit right, it's still hard to manage those
But he's
pieces.
learned, yeah, but he's learned
Yeah,
how to sequence the downswing nicely now because that's what I told him. He's like, how does this
yeah,
work? And I'm like, well, we've worked so hard on shot in the club. You don't have to worry about that anymore. That's
yeah.
ingrained. This is going to help finish it off, which is getting your left hip cleared so it doesn't hurt, getting the torso going, getting the handle going left so you can square the face. Because when the handle goes down the line too much, when it's more
Hmm.
like I call a neutral hand path, the face stays open, the ball doesn't draw. So he'll get the path right, but then the ball hangs out there and he just goes nuts. So that's
So
why I say,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we figured out that the handle left rotation piece is what squares the face up, gets it left of the path, and he can still draw it.
So what numbers is he looking at in terms of swing direction and path when he's looking to do what he wants to do?
Well, I mean, like the path, like again, when we're practicing, if we're just like working on feels,
Yeah.
we're trying to get it to like 4 to 6.
Okay. Right.
And then knowing, and he'll tell you this, knowing that he'll play it like 2 or 3,
Yeah.
but can
Yeah.
work, can sling it if he needs to. And then the other thing with his wedges is like he likes to be able to flick those wedges down. So we want that draw with a kind of a low trajectory. So we used to do a lot of off speed stuff
Hmm.
where I would have him hit 8 irons 100 yards,
Yeah.
which would drive him crazy. And he would try to hit his 100-yard club like 50 yards with a full swing. We did a lot
Hmm.
of that kind of training, a lot of deep practice, as I would call it,
Yeah.
so he could kind of ingrain the feel, especially. And then we've used a tons of bands. Like I'll put the band on his shoulder, under his feet. I'll hook bands into his belt and like jerk him the other direction. Like anything for him to like create an opposite feel, he really responds to nicely.
And you
But
know,
look at that coming down. They said all the backswing
pretty
stuff.
damn good.
It's unbelievable, right? How
I
good
should
it
have I
is from
just
like
should have started
five
off
to
with the video from
seven.
there. I
Yeah,
just gone,
it's
okay,
like it's
yeah.
unreal.
Yeah. Were you at any stage, and I noticed I kind of heard this discussed between tour coaches sometimes, or kind of more elite coaches would mention about other coaches is sometimes coaches are afraid to make changes. You know, they're afraid to rock the boat and, and
Hmm.
lose their tour player. How did you deal with that with this guy? And you're kind of like, like were you because you started at the start of this podcast where you're, I won that award and a little bit of imposter syndrome. Well, this is the ultimate challenge for that, really, isn't it? It's such an
Yeah.
idiosyncratic swing that you're standing there going, all right, everything's an ecosystem, so anything I do here is going to affect everything else. So I got to be right. Were you okay with possibly making mistakes and just be very open with him and go, let's just try this? Or were you, you know what, before I say anything to him, I'm going to investigate the hell out of every single thing I'm going to do? Or were you just, you know what, I trust myself. I know what I'm doing here.
I trusted myself. Yeah, I think I've done it for long enough to where I was. It's weird. It's kind of like I saw beauty in what he was doing because it
Yeah.
was kind of funky in spots, but then beautiful in others. And I don't know, it just came together in my head to where I like, okay, it was very clear what I needed to do
Yeah.
for whatever reason. I'm like, I got to slow his torso down. I got to make time. Like, I understand the sequence of what kind of needs to happen,
Hmm.
regardless of where that club is at the top. And he'll even say, like, one of the first times we met, like, I'm not going to mess with your top of your backswing. He goes, good, because that's all I got. I've made over, $11 million with that backswing. I don't think we need to mess with it.
Yeah,
The
he
one
knows where impact
time,
is.
well, oh, yeah, it's not even, and plus he's drawn it in the past. It's
Yeah.
not like we were trying to get him to a different pattern.
Hmm.
What I typically do with a player, and usually they're coming to you, they're struggling, is I always ask them like, what were your feels when you played your best?
Hmm.
That you know, a lot of times they forgot, right?
Yeah.
That's the cool thing is when we will get on a good session, he'll be like, I feel like I'm back in 2016 again. This is as good as I've
Yeah.
hit it. And that was one of our moments last week. That's why I was like so disappointed couldn't figure the putter out. But and he's normally a great putter. But yeah, it's so cool to be able to kind of put those pieces together and like develop a pattern that works. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at him coming down there, it's like it's as good as it gets,
Oh, it's so good at impact too.
right? Yeah, it's amazing. We did the only time I've ever worked with his backswing as far as like his hands and arms. Occasionally
Hmm.
his hand path will drift. Like if you look at it like right from the takeaway, take him back to address. Like his first like from 1 to 3, he's pretty conventional. His
Yeah,
hands are
so
going to move.
he's got that ball significantly out of helix
Oh
set
yeah,
up
that's
too.
another
Yeah.
thing. Everybody on Instagram says, "Oh, why does he address the ball?" Hold on a second. So why does he address the ball out of the hosel or whatever? He
Yeah.
goes, that's how he perceives the sweet spot. That's
Okay.
his answer to that. Like he said, well, I guess one of his old coaches tried to get him to line it up, and he like missed 6 cuts in a row, and they quit doing that pretty quick. So again, it's like I don't care, leave it alone. But I mean,
Yeah.
his takeaway, watch, his hands are going to move in, his left arm's going to move in,
Yeah.
which I really like.
Yeah, I think
So
it's beautiful. It's
stop right
lovely
there.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So occasionally his hands will move a little straight going back,
Hmm.
and he'll have a little tougher time drawing the ball. So we did make sure that the hands are always moving inward
Okay.
at the start, and his trail hip moves back, and he like immediately got the path back to the right, no problem.
He's got a little Cabrera-esque kind of action
Oh
to it at
yeah.
that point. Yeah,
Oh,
I
it's
like
so
that.
cool, right?
Yeah. I love the trail forearm movement in backswing too. The way he pitches that shaft up. I really like
Yep.
that position. So
Yeah.
there's a
Breaks all
lot
the
of good
rules
pieces.
there.
Oh
Yeah.
man, but that's why I love it, right? As a golf coach,
Absolutely.
it's really easy to sit behind Tiger and go, "That's really amazing. That's really good." The
Yeah.
challenge is when you get a player like that in front of you, and if you're ever gonna get it to that top level, you're gonna get a player like that in front of you, and you better know what you're doing with him. In terms of that. So you're gonna get a player like that.
I did yeah, and I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos of
Mhm.
him back in the day too. That was the first thing that a lot of coaches I'm sure will do.
All right, so another one of your players, Keegan Bronberg here. And again, for people watching on YouTube, this is going to be a lot easier than people sitting at home. But let's roll
Yeah.
through this swing and we'll just go and kind of see what you've worked on with Keegan.
So
Um,
when was this taken? That'll be, let's
this
see.
one
I can probably tell
is,
you.
yeah,
Take it
this is
to the
probably,
top and I'll tell you.
okay. I think this is
This
from
is
a little while
another
back.
fascinating. It's not that far. Yeah, it's probably not that long ago.
So what we're looking at here for people listening is player, obviously tour player, great setup, takes the club a little bit outside, a little bit closed. So club head resides somewhere between hands and golf ball at P2, which is shaft parallel. And then that the shaft gets quite a bit steep in backswing, neither good nor bad, and then gets into a great spot up top, um, and good in
Maybe.
transition.
Maybe it's
Now,
not a good spot for him.
yeah, but does dead it a little bit. Works it a little bit outside of the body on the way down and great rotation. So opens up a lot through impact. So
Mhm.
again, same principle in terms of obviously what did the player want and what route did you guys take in helping him achieve that?
Yeah. So yeah, Keegan's a great player, mini tour guy. Played at Ball State. Didn't quite make it through Q school this year. I think he finished pretty close to getting through first stage. Plays G
Hmm.
Pro. A lot of talent. Love working with this kid. Another kind of unusual looking ish swing, which
Hmm.
I think is cool. But again, it's like I think when you work with players, you've got to explore and sort of pay attention to when they play their best
Yeah.
versus when they look their best. Okay. So this is probably not that long ago. We've gone through a pattern of where he struggled a few months ago with his
Okay.
ball striking. And what I found was when he first came to me, we were Okay, let's back up. I'm getting ahead of myself, right? So
Yeah.
wants to cut the ball. He's a fader.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the first thing, right? So
Yeah.
we're working in the sort of fade pattern,
Mm-hmm.
and he would lift his arms a lot
Okay.
in the backswing, and then he would lay the club off quite a bit at the top,
Okay.
right? So, and I was okay with that. I didn't like the way he was moving, his body was moving early on. It would be cool if we had like before stuff. We were working together for a couple years now, I think, probably 2 years,
Okay.
two
Nice.
seasons. Um, he basically in the backstroke, he didn't turn his hips a whole lot. He would lay the club off, which was fine, but
Mm-hmm.
then he would jump out of his right side super early. Right hip would kick in towards the ball super early, and he would almost get too above plane and get a little wipey. Right. So
Okay.
it's like, and I told him like we want to cut the ball, it's great, but we actually have to shallow it out a little bit and hit sort of what I'd call more shallow cuts
Yeah.
because it would really bleed up into his driver, and his driver would start curving a little too much left to right.
So he would get a
So
little steep on it, a little bit too out. Path would
yeah,
get a
yeah,
little
yeah.
too far left.
So
Okay.
yeah, but this is the point. This is the interesting thing is, and this is where we just started our off-season program a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we, as you start figuring out where your players play your best and where they don't, he does not play well from this position at the top. Even though it looks sexy, looks very lined up, no
Yeah.
good. No
Okay.
good. For whatever reason, when he starts to transition, if the club kicks back a little bit too much and gets not too shallow, but again, he was starting to hit draws, which we were
Okay.
sort of working away from fades just to kind of like exaggerate the pattern. But then he played like shit.
Yeah.
So we're digging back into we do a lot of stuff online and just texting or whatever. And I was like, look, we got to
Okay.
get back to the takeaway. Getting the takeaway was pretty conventional. We got to get you feeling like the club and the center of mass of the club is more behind your hands at the top.
Okay.
Okay. So it'd be cool if you had the newer video of the last session that we did. That club's going to be pointed a lot more left and a lot more laid up the top, kind of like a Daniel Berger look
Okay.
at the
So
top of the backswing.
right, it's
Yeah.
gonna be more out kind of
So
here. Not to that
exactly.
extent, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it'd be pointed more left at the top. We have worked a lot on his pivot to where we're trying to get again him not to like jump off his right side quite so soon
Mm-hmm.
to where he can not get super high coming down. But as soon as we got that, then we started getting that ball flight we were looking for again because it makes it easier for him to line the sweet spot up a little bit more
Yeah.
with the hand path coming down from a laid off position. If we
Mm-hmm.
had to like say why did we do it again, this is like that's why I take so many videos of my guys and like sort of document when they're playing well, when they're not playing well, what's the difference, what's the swing look like,
Yeah.
what's the feedback they're giving me. And I like I said, I preference wise, I love where that is at the top.
Oh, it looks
He
like
he's
anybody
not
listening, it's bang on the
right.
money. You couldn't
Oh, it
fault it
looks
for
it
love nor
looks
money.
amazing.
Yeah.
Can't hit the shot that he wants to hit from there.
But when he gets it, let's
When he
say
gets it
down,
laid off,
yeah.
yeah, if you go back and look at my last Instagram, I think I saw him like 2 weeks ago. Where literally I'm trying to get him to rotate his left forearm more
Yeah.
from 3 to 4 or
Hmm.
two to three, 3 to 4. And I
Yeah.
want him, I'm feeling like he's pointing the club so far left at the top of the backswing. And it's
Yeah.
not that much, it's just a little bit more.
Because he doesn't
Ball
have a
striking got
lot of
way
rotation
better.
in that forearm early, does he not?
No, not at
No, he
all.
keeps that fairly kind of,
He's going more the
supinated.
other
Yeah.
direction. Yeah. So we're trying to almost feel like we're laid off more and actually the face more open at the top of the backswing.
Yeah.
And then all
Yeah.
the
Because
pivot
because
stuff that we're
because he when he
kind of
gets it
worked
when
on.
he does this one we're looking at, then the shallowing piece is that forearm rotating because it's moving the opposite of what he's doing in backswing. So you feel if you
Correct.
can get that earlier, he's not going to have that adaptation in transition. Therefore, we can keep that club a little bit more in front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. Again, it's like sometimes things don't
That's
make sense.
fantastic.
You
No,
just
I think
have
it's
to like
amazing.
figure it out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and again, it's like I'm not trying to make them look prettier. I want it actually we're trying to make it look uglier because we know it works.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
what's what,
it's as simple as that.
what type of
And that's
drills were you just basically working on? Hey,
oh,
you know
I'm
what? I
moving
just
him.
want you to.
I'm in there
Oh, okay.
moving
You're
him.
hands on.
I'm
Okay.
hands on. Yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
there moving him to the top. I'm
Yeah.
grabbing his left forearm at this point,
Yeah.
and we use sort of the bucket analogy where you got a range bucket in front of you and you're dumping
Yeah.
the bucket of water over your shoulder.
Yeah. Just
I'm
trying to kind
having
of
to do
get.
a lot of left
Yeah.
arm only back swings
Okay.
where he's literally trying to rotate it and lay it off.
Yeah.
Um,
So he feels that left forearm's pronating on its own because of the way the
Yep.
golf. Yeah,
Yep. And
I
it's
love that.
amazing. Like he's awesome. He's a great kid. And
Yeah,
as soon as we get it, he'll be like, yep, that's it. That's it.
he's
It's just,
strong too, eh?
oh yeah, he hits
Yeah,
it plenty far. Um, really good putter. I actually first started working with his putting. He came to me for putting and then ended up coming back for the rest of the game. Chips it really good. I mean, he's gonna be out there.
yeah.
He's been pro for like 3 years or so, I think.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah, still
he's
pretty
starting his
new.
journey.
Yeah, he's finished pretty high in a lot of G pros and some
Yeah,
mini tour things, but he can make a lot of birdies. But
nice.
again, it's just that's one of those odd situations that just I think that's so cool because when you sort of figure it out amongst yourselves, like he's not one to go, oh, this looks really good and let's play from there. He knows what it feels like. He knows where the club is, and then when that thing starts coming out, you make that sound and you get the ball flight you're after. Then you're like, okay, this is it. This is where we want to be.
So for those coaches, I think this is invaluable, right? Because this is the stuff, right? And when I started learning, you'd go to seminars and online, and you would get, okay, well, this is what you do to do it right. Blah, blah. And there's nothing wrong with that. You got to have a
Yeah,
foundation piece. But this is the stuff that you really need to know. This is where it gets into the meat of it, where it goes, you know what? Okay, that is right, but that doesn't work for that guy in front of you. And he has
right.
learned to play an elite game at elite level doing what he does. And you got
Oh,
to
yeah,
mold those pieces in learning what you do. So it's a culmination, right? That's why it pissed me off so much when we see on Instagram or social media and somebody comments on a swing. I'm like, you have no idea what the
no
player's
idea.
intent, no idea of their physical condition, no idea their mental condition, no idea what their
Yeah,
coaches were, none whatsoever. And people talk shit about it. And it's like, what you just showed there in the last hour is probably the most valuable thing I think we've done on this podcast so far in
I
terms of
hope so.
coaches, in terms of their information. I think they're going to learn a huge amount from that.
Cool. I hope
Yeah.
so. Yeah, it's like you can't like, players have to like see going back to the intention in ball flight.
Yeah.
Like he started hitting draws and it looked cool, but he didn't know where to aim.
Yeah.
Like he would tell me like, yeah, I'm like setting up. I think I'm like set up for a draw. Really, probably more neutral and set up for a cut. And I short side myself. And I'm pissed. And like it just like the picture wasn't matching up with the pattern.
Yeah.
So as soon as we start hitting that that little fade again, now he can go and be himself and start to play golf again.
All right, man. I think that was probably the longest podcast we've done. It's
Hey,
like 2 hours.
you know how mine roll. Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to split this one up.
Thanks for hanging in there with me. Yeah, it's
Oh
hopefully
man.
that I get going and
No,
I
that
mean
was
I get into it.
amazing.
So
No, it was
good.
class. Thank you so much. So, obviously, club golfers, if you're still hanging on to this late, I hope you did. Thanks to Jason for helping you all out, and then obviously the coaches. Again, this is just my opinion. You don't have to take it. I think this is probably the most valuable coaching section we've done in this podcast because it's real world practical stuff that you can help you develop your career and develop working with really good players. And I think that's at the end of the day for most golfers, that's what you want, right? You want that real world practical thing, which is fantastic. So thank you so much, my man. We know you've got probably a lot of requests now that you're such an elite player. Hope you still
Whatever.
talk to me when you're famous and out on tour 30
It's
weeks
all
a year.
downhill from here, brother.
Yeah, we're done now.
No, I
All right,
appreciate
man.
you having me on again, man. It's like hopefully people can hang in there and you probably split it up into two parts. But I value your friendship and the work that you're doing and putting in. Mad respect for your career and I'm pretty excited to see where you're going to go as well. So always here to help.
Appreciate that. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jason.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone. So that wraps up the episode. And honestly, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed chatting with Jason because that was one of my favorite ones to do. We got into the really into the weeds with a couple of his players. So I hope both club players and club coaches really took something out of that. Jason, as was said in the podcast, has been a good friend of mine for the last 2.5, nearly 3 years now. And he's been so helpful to me that sometimes when you are that person for a lot of other people, nearly that becomes your tag or your title. You're a great mentor. I think what's been lost in the rain over the last couple of years is how good a coach Jason actually is in his own right. And I think people are starting to see that now with his players, with their performance, with the level he's attaining. And if you ever get the opportunity to even listen to Jason or watch him do a presentation, you'll know you're in the presence of something really special because he exhibits the technical side of things with great awareness of the person and the human being in front of them, and it's just a real pleasure to watch him teach. And if you follow him online, that's fantastic. If you don't, I encourage you to do so. Golf Guru TV is on most of the platforms out there, social media platforms. And again, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you have any. So obviously a big thank you to you, the listeners out there, as without you listening and downloading these podcasts, there wouldn't be a show. I know we've been absent for a little while over the summer, but we're coming back with a bang now with some new episodes, and I really appreciate the support and the feedback. And just a reminder, if you do enjoy it, please make sure to rate the show on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. As always, if you want to work with myself in person or online and have any questions on golf or the podcast, you can contact me on Instagram at Steve Moore Golf or through the website stevemoregolf.com. Finally, for your own game, don't forget, work hard, work diligently, but most importantly, work smart, and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.